So often we use our visual appearance and the numbers on the scale to justify why we need to start exercising. But are there other telltale signs that you know you need to start exercising? On today's episode of the Exercise is Health podcast, we're going to explore this question because there are a lot of reasons why you need to start exercising that don't have anything to do with your weight. So we're going to cue the intro song and then we're going to dive right into this conversation. Welcome to the Exercise is Health podcast, where we're talking about exercise, health, and the interconnectedness of the two. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we will be coming to you every single week from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg. Hey, what's going on, exercisers? This is Charlie. Before we dive into this week's episode, I want to let you know about a new training that's happening this week titled How to Rebuild Your Aching Body in as Little as 6 weeks Without Changing Your Lifestyle. See, if you love the discussions that we have every single week on the Exercise is Health podcast, but you want more of the practical application, the details of how to take the information and apply it to your workouts, then you need to be on this training. All you have to do to get registered for free is go to secrets.exerciseforlifemethod.com. But space is limited, so make sure to get registered ASAP. Now, without further ado, let's dive into this week's episode. Hey, welcome back, exercisers, to the Exercise is Health podcast. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we're coming to you from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg, here in Schaumburg, Illinois, where we believe that your health is your most valuable asset, and the single best thing that you can do to both boost and protect this asset is exercise. Specifically, exercise is geared towards building the health and function of your muscles. Now, so many of you exercisers have already taken the time to leave us a rating and review, and we appreciate that so much. In fact, we want to highlight one that we just recently received.
So this week's 5-star review says, "Awesome. A lot of great info about exercise and MAT explained so clearly. This podcast also helps to look at exercise from a new perspective. Thanks to Charlie and Julie for their insight and inspiration." Thank you so much for that 5-star review. We appreciate your feedback and we look forward to hearing from more and more of you. As you guys know, we thrive off of these reviews, and we would love for you to go to Apple Podcasts or right on your app and review us. Let us know your thoughts, and you never know, you might hear your review on the podcast next week.
Now, today we're exploring this idea of how do you know if you need to start exercising? Because a lot of times we'll use the numbers on the scale, like our weight, or we'll look at how our clothes are fitting or our reflection in the mirror, and we'll justify whether or not we're exercising based off that. But are there other ways that you know that you need to start exercising? Because if you've listened to our podcast at all, you know that we specialize in exercise, but not for weight loss. In fact, we don't really think that exercise is the primary driver of weight loss. So if you're waiting for weight gain in order to say whether or not you need to start exercising, well, there may be a lot of other things that come beforehand or in addition to weight gain that would give you some insight of okay, yeah, I need to start taking this exercise thing a little bit more seriously. So that is a question that we want to explore with you today.
You know, there are a lot of things in life that I'm not all that well versed on. Things like my teeth, for example, when I smile in the mirror, they look white and they look nice. But I know there's a problem when something starts hurting, or when one tooth looks like it's getting a little twisted, or, there's visual and physical feelings that I have that tell me something might be going wrong. Or, for example, with my car, I don't really know that much stuff about cars, but I know that when I hear a weird sound, or when I see a light that comes on my dashboard, I know there's something that, needs to get fixed up and needs to be addressed. So a lot of people exercise and the health of their body is not the thing that they are the most well versed at. And that's probably why you might be listening to this podcast. You enjoy learning about it. But I hope that in today's podcast, we can teach you some of the signs and symptoms of things to look for to tell you, hey, you probably should start directing your exercise towards improving the health and function of your body. I think that one of the big things that people exercise for is when they feel like their body needs to lose physical mass, or they need to get smaller, or they need to lose weight. So that is a visual and, something that people experience that is like, hey, here's an indicator. You got to start exercising. And exercise can be a great addition to your lifestyle changes to help you lose weight. But there are a lot of other factors that you could assess on your own body, almost like your toothache or the light coming on in your dashboard, that tell you, hey, your body needs to be tuned up and needs to be maintained, or your body needs to get that tooth check. So we're going to talk about those today. And hopefully after you listen to this podcast, you're ready to assess those on yourself and get to it.
Yeah, I really love this idea because so often we hear, well, I don't need to lose weight, so I don't need to exercise. And so people are just very much unaware of why else you may need to exercise aside from trying to lose weight, or what some indicators are that, hey, yeah, you need to get up, you need to be moving around, you need to be physically active, and here's how your body is telling you that that's what it's wanting, aside from the number on the scale going up. And so if we're unaware of those things, then we're never going to know, right? Like, I love the analogy that you gave about the car, right? I don't really know exactly what's going on under my hood, but I know when a light pops up. So it's like, you don't necessarily need to know everything that's happening, with your organs and stuff, but if there are these metaphorical lights that pop up in your body, it would be nice to be able to recognize those and say, okay, yeah, my body's telling me I definitely need to start exercising. So that is where we want to go with this today. So one thing that often surprises people about exercise that they didn't think would actually improve, like, okay, we hear it improves our strength and, building muscle and our endurance and stuff like that. But we don't necessarily think that exercise per se is going to improve our joint mobility. Like, a lot of times when we think of improving our joint mobility or how well our joints or our body is able to move, we think about like stretching or stuff like that. We don't necessarily think about, doing really focused resistance training or going for walks or, riding the cycle bike or, just doing exercise in general. We think about, all the flexibility stuff. But one of the clearest indicators that your body's telling you, hey, you need to get up, you need to move around more, you need to do more exercise, is if you can feel your body starting to tighten up. And if you can feel that your motion throughout your body is starting to get less and less and less, especially as the years go by. And so that is one of the first indicators that I feel like people need to be aware of. That can be one of those lights that pop up, is like, yeah, I just don't feel like my body's moving as well as it used to. I definitely need to start exercising.
I love this first point. And you know what most people call this, Charlie, is, well, I'm just getting old.
Yep.
I hate that one. And the question I always ask in response to that is, well, are you doing consistent, focused resistance training? And people always say, well, I'm just getting old. And I'm like, well,
that wasn't the question.
Exactly. Well, exactly. So one of the greatest, most potent ways to combat gaining that I'm just getting old symptom is to do consistent, regular, focused resistance training. And yes, moving around, general activity does help, but the best way is to be doing focused, controlled resistance training. It is the best way to maintain and to continue to improve your joint range of motion, or what some people like to call flexibility. Now, signs that you're losing flexibility and signs that you're losing joint range of motion can turn up in ways like Charlie was saying, like you're getting achy, or your muscles feel tighter. But it can also show up in ways of you're doing stuff in your daily life and you realize that you can't move as well. For example, I haven't shrunk, but I can't reach to the top to get that jar at the grocery store. Or I'm noticing that I have to take smaller strides now with my legs. Or, wow, I used to be able to twist and rotate and use my right arm to grab the seatbelt and pull it around, and now I can't. Or I used to be able to reach behind my back and, strap my bra on, and now my shoulders can't handle that motion. Those are all signs that your body is losing functionality. And the good thing about this is that muscles are highly adaptable. So when you start training your muscles, they're going to start functioning they're going to start improving function. And when they improve function, they're going to allow you to move more. So the first dashboard headlight to say, hey, you need to start exercising to improve your function, or you're losing function, so make sure you're doing something to improve your function, is losing flexibility and losing range of motion.
Yeah, that point you bring up of like, oh, I'm just getting old. Like a lot of people do feel that way. It's, we don't have another explanation for the aches and the pains and the tightness that we're feeling. So we just blame it on aging. But it reminds me of a client of yours who came in and she had to take an entire year off from, she was always exercising, always doing kind of like what we deemed to be like the right things when she would exercise. But she started just feeling like older and older and older. Like she was starting to feel her age more. And so she took a whole year off from exercising, thinking that might help. But after that year, like her body was just worse. And so the reason why I bring this up is because I want to highlight what you said, Julie, of the focused resistance training and how important that is. We're not talking about just general physical activity. We're talking about really focused resistance training, because once she started working with you and once she started implementing that, that's when everything changed for her. And all those kind of aches and pains that she was associating with aging before, they were no longer there, and they were no longer issues at all. She didn't feel inhibited by her body. And so I think that that's such a cool example of just the power of, not only just doing exercise, but you can do exercise if you still feel like, oh, my body's just getting old. I'm just getting old. Well, then you need to kind of ramp up the focus aspect of it. And that's exactly what you helped your client do. And then with that, that's when everything changed for her.
Charlie, you bring up such a really, really good point. And that is that when people come here and they're losing range of motion or having the I'm getting old symptoms, they come from two places. Number one, they don't exercise, so we get them exercising. And number two, they've always exercised. And like, well, I've always exercised. Why is the solution exercise? I've already been doing that. Well, many people, before they've been exposed to our philosophy, Charlie, is they've been exercising the way they were taught in middle school, in high school, to pass the, presidential exams for physical fitness in elementary school, all those things. And they keep doing those things. And the goal of exercise when you're young is usually taught in the way to win a game in sports or to perform. And we're not talking about that. Exercise is health is not about exercising to perform, exercising to compete, and exercising to get stuff done. Exercise is health is all about exercising to improve the health and function of your body. It's a different outcome goal. So when we talk about resistance training, we adjust all people's exercise that come to us so that it is more focused towards improving the health and function of your body. Even if you've already been exercising for years and years and years, we get tons of people like that. But the thing is that they're coming to us for a reason, because that kind of exercise is no longer working for you. So thank you for bringing that up, Charlie, because I think people forget that. It's like, well, I've always exercised, so why are you telling me to exercise more? That's obviously not the solution. Well, it's how you're exercising. The how is so important.
Yeah, the how really is everything when it comes to building your health with exercise. Okay, so number one thing to look at is, is your joint range of motion changing? Do you feel like you're not moving as well as you once did? The next thing to look at is it taking your body a little bit longer to get started than it once did? So growing up in Wisconsin in the wintertime, when you had a new car, you would always want to make sure and, start the engine and let the engine get warmed up and when it was super cold out. But it wouldn't take that long for the car to get warm and the engine to get warm and everything like that. When you had an old car, you would want to make sure to go out there 20, 30 minutes well beforehand, get that engine started. First of all, it's going to take a while to get started. And then secondly, once it actually does get started, it's going to take a while to warm up. All right. So if you're feeling like your body is trending more towards that older car, that older engine of like, it just takes a little bit longer to get moving. Say like when you've been sitting down watching a show and you stand up and you're like, okay, before I take that first step after standing up from the couch, I just need to kind of like regain my composure here. Not necessarily because you feel like your blood pressure dropping and getting dizzy, but it's just like, okay, let me just make sure all my muscles are in check. Let me make sure like I got my joints good, everything's good. Okay, cool. Now we can move forward. Like if you're feeling like it just takes a little bit longer for your body to get going than it once did, that's a definite sign that you need to be exercising.
Absolutely. It's almost like we've all experienced this when we've taken a long car trip and you get out of the car for the first time in 4 hours. You're like, oh my gosh. Now that is normal because you just put your body through an experience of, sedentary and not really moving for 4 hours. But if that happens like every time you're sitting down and standing up, like you sat down to eat dinner for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and then you stand up and you're like, okay, let me get my body warmed up. That is a sign. Another sign that relates to this, meaning it takes you a while to get your body going, is that if you have an extensive morning routine just to get out of bed. I have a beautiful example of this. I had this client who came to me in his mid-30s, and in our consultation, he told me about the hour-long stretching, strengthening, movement routine that he had to do for his back muscles just to get out of bed. And one of the biggest signs to know that we were being successful in our sessions together was that time just kept getting lower and lower and lower. And he just couldn't even imagine. I said, my goal is for you to have no morning routine. And he was like, what? Don't you think people should have a morning routine? I was like, yes, if you want to have one, but you shouldn't be obligated just so that you can get out of bed, especially in your mid-30s. So a lot of times this develops over time, especially for people that have overdone it with their bodies, meaning they've exercised in a way that maybe doesn't build the health and function of their body, maybe is more towards performance or competition or athletics. And it happens with people that don't exercise because their muscles are being not stimulated appropriately at all. So if you've noticed that when you are transitioning from one activity to the other, from laying to standing, from sleeping to, all these transition times, if those times take your body a while to acclimate to, that is a really good sign that your muscles are becoming deconditioned because they're not switching gears quickly. So look out for that.
Yeah, Julie, that's such a key one. And really that transitions beautifully to the third way that you need to be exercising, which is if you find yourself constantly getting these little flare-ups or these little injuries or maybe some bigger flare-ups, like you find yourself throwing out your back way more frequently than you would like to, or if you find yourself getting frozen shoulder type symptoms way more frequently than anybody else it happening to. These little things of like, oh my gosh, my body is spazzing out right now. My body is freaking out saying, oh, this area is really tight, or, we need to lock up this area, or we need a certain area of our body to feel like super unhealthy or unwell. That's a sign that you need to start exercising. Now, not right in that moment when you've thrown out your back. That's not when you start exercising. But once things like actually calm down a little bit and you feel like you're able to get up off the couch, then you know that it's not like, okay, good, I've cleared this episode of throwing out my back. Now I can just kind of wait until the next one. No. After your body's recovered, that's the time when you start exercising. But like we've been saying all along, the focus, the specificity, how you go about doing it, those really are the key components. So you don't just jump into whatever kind of group fitness class, fits your schedule or whatever. It's like you need to be doing things that are really specific, really tailored to your body, because your body's already showing some signs of like, yeah, you know what? We're not really happy with how things are sitting right now. We know we need to do something, but it can't just be anything.
Absolutely. If you have any area of your body that you're like, yeah, I regularly injure that area, that is a sign that your body is deconditioned in that area. And when you really think about this, it's actually related to the point number one, where you're losing joint range of motion, meaning there are positions your body can't handle. Because when you throw out your back, you usually can relate it back to like, well, I did this thing and now, my back is really tight, I can't do the things I want to do. Or if you injure your hip, you can usually relate it to emotion or an activity or something you were doing in your daily life that your body could not handle that position. A personal example of this one is, have you ever heard of someone that has just like weak ankles and they usually sprain their ankles all the time? That means that their ankles cannot tolerate that specific twisting motion. And I know that you might be listening to this and you're like, well, can people sprain their ankle and not sprain their ankle? Yes. I am like a prime example of this. I used to twist my ankle all the time. And we actually don't think about our ankles as having muscles. We think about our glutes, we think about our abs, we think about our biceps, but there are so many muscles that are supposed to control and keep your ankles strong and stable. And now I actually don't roll my ankle as much, but it's interesting when I do, because we all step off of a curb weird or, do a weird turn every once in a while because we're not always thinking about what is my ankle doing. We're thinking about life. I can twist my ankle, the thing that used to lead to an ankle sprain, and I'm fine. I'm completely fine. I actually used to tap dance regularly up to about 3 years ago, and a tap shoe has a little heel on it. And I remember so many times I have like tipped off the side of the shoe, landed on the side of my shoe, and everyone in class looks at me like, oh my gosh, are you okay? And I just stand back up and I'm like, wow, I'm okay. Because I've worked on the strength and function of the muscles that control my ankle. So sometimes it's not about the position. We always want to blame the position. Oh, I can't twist and bend like that. Oh, I can't, sidestep like that. Oh, I have to be careful not to bend over like that. Or I have to make sure not to twist my ankle down like that. So let's make sure I get really supportive shoes. But it's the lack of conditioning and the lack of function in the muscles that are supposed to be supporting that joint. So if you have an area of your body, your ankles, your knee, your hip, your shoulders, your back, anything that is a chronic flare-up area, that is a really good sign that that area is incredibly deconditioned and really could use some TLC in the gym with working on strength and function of those muscles.
So if you are wondering, okay, do I really need to be exercising? Like my weight's not going up. I feel like, I'm fine with my physique. I don't need to be, super cut or shredded or jacked or anything like that. Like I'm fine with how I look. My body weight is just fine. Do I really need to be exercising? Well, ask yourself, are your joints moving as well as they used to? Or do you feel like there are some signs and symptoms like, oh, my body's telling me I'm starting to get a little bit older? Number two, is it taking you a little bit longer to get started, either early in the morning or like transition from one activity to the next? And number three, do you find that you have these chronic flare-ups that happen either in one area of your body or throughout your body, whether it's your back or your shoulder or your hips or your feet or whatever? Do you find that, there are constantly little issues that are just kind of coming up throughout your body? If you can answer yes to any of those questions, then those are ways that your body is telling you, hey, we need you to start exercising me. We need you to start exercising me because I'm starting to not feel that well. I'm starting to lose function. I'm starting to lose health, and exercise would be really helpful.
So if you felt like you listened to this and you're thinking, yeah, I'm definitely one of three of those or all three of those, and I need a little bit more guidance. Charlie and I have worked really hard to help you take those next steps to really develop programs for yourself or follow with our programs to get you started on this exercise to build the health and function, because we know that it's really not readily available in the content that's currently out there. So I encourage you to check out Charlie's webinar. He has created a webinar that streams live on Thursdays at 4 p.m. Eastern time.
Yep, it's called How to Rebuild Your Aching Body in as little as 6 weeks without changing your lifestyle. So all you have to do to get registered is go to secrets.exerciseforlifemethod.com and you can register there. There's no cost to attend, and yeah, all you do is enter your name and email address, click the big green button, and you will be signed up. You will be good to go. So check it out, secrets.exerciseforlifemethod.com. So who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know that is resistant to the idea of exercising because they feel like, well, I don't really need to lose weight? Share this episode with them so they can learn about 3 other ways that their body may be telling them that it's time for them to start exercising. And while you're online, head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. We love hearing from you, and it helps people find this podcast when they're looking for information on exercise and they're looking for information on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us that 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week. So what'd you think about that episode? Did you find the information useful? If you enjoyed what we discussed during today's episode of the Exercise is Health podcast, then you are going to love what I'm going to be presenting during my new training, How to Rebuild Your Aching Body in as little as 6 weeks without changing your lifestyle. It's happening this week, and you can get registered for free by going to secrets.exerciseforlifemethod.com. But space is limited, so you need to head there now. secrets.exerciseforlifemethod.com, and I can't wait to see you there. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Gates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.